There are moments in human history when a single discovery forces us to question everything we thought we knew about our world. In the quiet of an old library, a scholar unrolls a faded parchment. The scent of dust and time fills the air. As the candlelight dances across its surface, lines begin to appear, coastlines, islands, mountains drawn with impossible precision. It is a map, but not just any map. It is a window into a forgotten world. What if these maps, crafted centuries before satellites, before compasses as we know them, held knowledge that should not have existed? What if the ancients knew far more about our planet than history dares to admit? Across the centuries, whispers of these forbidden maps have unsettled scholars and explorers alike. Maps that show Antarctica without ice. Maps that depict the Americas long before Columbus. Maps that align perfectly with modern cartography, yet were inked in an age of myths and miracles. Who drew them? How did they know? Perhaps our ancestors were not merely wanderers confined to their own continents. Perhaps they were observers of the heavens, mathematicians of the earth, and keepers of an ancient science that vanished beneath the sands of time. Each line on those parchments tells a story not just of geography, but of memory, exploration, and loss. A story written in ink, but speaking of fire, ice, and centuries of silence. As we unfold these maps once more, we must be prepared for the possibility that the world we know was mapped long before we arrived to name it. And that somewhere, deep in the past, a civilization stood at the edge of the known world and saw everything. It began, as all great mysteries do, with a single question. In the year 1513, within the grand walls of the Ottoman Empire, an admiral named Piri Reis bent over a sheet of gazelle's skin. He was not merely drawing coastlines. He was stitching together fragments of human memory. The result was a map that should not have existed, a chart of the world centuries ahead of its time. The Piri Reis Map, as it would later be called, displayed the coasts of South America in astonishing detail. But that was not what startled historians the most. The map also showed the icy outline of Antarctica 300 years before anyone officially discovered the continent. Even more disturbing, it depicted Antarctica without ice, suggesting knowledge of a land that had been frozen for thousands of years. How could such a thing be possible? Piri Reis himself claimed he had copied the information from older sources, maps from ancient civilizations long forgotten. Among them, he mentioned charts from Alexander the Great's era, and even older records said to be drawn by unknown mariners of antiquity. When European scholars eventually examined the parchment, they dismissed it as myth, coincidence, or error. But the precision of its coordinates, its alignment with modern measurements, and its geographical accuracy told another story, one that refused to stay silent. And soon, Piri Reis would not stand alone. Other maps began to surface, each more unsettling than the last. The Oronteus Finaeus Map of 1531, showing Antarctica's rivers and mountains beneath the ice. The Buache Map, illustrating underwater ridges known today only through sonar. And ancient Chinese world charts mapping territories far beyond their supposed reach. With every new discovery, the same question echoed louder. Had someone, long before Columbus, long before any known empire, already mapped the Earth? The boundaries of time began to blur. What if the age of exploration did not begin in the 15th century at all? What if it had merely been rediscovered? Thus, the mystery was born, a riddle etched in ink and silence, daring humanity to remember what it had long forgotten. As the centuries passed, the strange patterns hidden within those ancient maps refused to fade. Scholars, explorers, and skeptics alike began to re-examine them. Armed now with modern science, satellite imagery, and the precision of computers. What they found blurred the fragile line between history and myth. When the coastlines of the Piri Reis Map were compared with modern cartographic data, the match was uncanny. The mountains, the river mouths, even the subtle curves of South America's coast, each one aligned with astonishing precision. But the most haunting revelation lay beneath the frozen continent of Antarctica. In 1959, seismic surveys conducted by British and Swedish scientists revealed the subglacial topography of Antarctica, the land that lies beneath miles of ice. To their astonishment, it matched the contours on Piri Reis's map almost perfectly. How could a 16th century admiral have drawn what only radar and satellites could see? The deeper researchers looked, the stranger the picture became. The Oronteus Finaeus map, drawn in 1531, depicted rivers and mountain ranges now known to exist beneath Antarctica's ice cap. The Buache map, created in the 18th century, showed the continent divided into two land masses separated by a water channel, a feature later confirmed by modern geological studies. The evidence piled up like layers of sediment, compressing into a single undeniable truth. Someone, long before modern civilization, had seen the world as it truly was. Some believed it was proof of a lost seafaring culture, perhaps a civilization that thrived during the last ice age, before sea levels rose and swallowed its memory. Others turned their eyes to the stars, suggesting that such knowledge could not have been born of the Earth at all. Ancient legends began to sound less like stories and more like distant echoes of forgotten realities. The Sumerians spoke of gods who mapped the heavens and the earth. The Egyptians built monuments aligned perfectly with the stars. The Greeks told tales of a golden age when men sailed freely across the world. Could these maps be remnants of that age, a memory preserved through the chaos of time, passed down through fragments and forgotten scrolls? The realization dawned slowly, but with weight. Our ancestors may not have been primitive wanderers, lost in darkness. They might have been the keepers of a knowledge far older, far deeper, and far more advanced than history ever dared to believe. And in those silent, yellowed parchments, they left us a trace of their voice, a whisper from a vanished world, calling out through the centuries, asking us to listen. But knowledge, as history has shown again and again, is both a gift and a threat. The moment the implications of these ancient maps reached the academic world, a wall of silence rose in defense. The maps were too accurate, too impossible, too disruptive. To accept them meant rewriting everything. The timeline of human civilization, the origins of navigation, the very idea of who we are. For centuries, humanity had built a comforting narrative. That progress moves forward in a straight line, from ignorance to enlightenment. But the ancient maps told a different story, a circle, perhaps, where knowledge rises, falls, and is born again. The debates grew fierce. Some scholars dismissed the evidence as coincidence or misinterpretation. Others risked their careers by suggesting the unthinkable, that an advanced civilization had once walked the earth, charted its lands, and vanished without a trace. In university halls and conference rooms, arguments raged. Impossible, they said. The ancients had no telescopes, no compasses accurate enough, no ships capable of crossing such distances, and yet the evidence lay before them, ink on parchment that refused to be forgotten. The greatest blow came when skepticism turned personal. Researchers who dared to speak of lost knowledge were labeled dreamers, pseudo-historians, even heretics of science. Grants disappeared. Journals refused to publish. The silence returned heavy and deliberate, and still the maps remained. The lines drawn by unknown hands continued to challenge every boundary we set upon ourselves. It was as if the truth itself was trapped beneath ice, frozen by pride, buried by fear, waiting for the courage of a future age to thaw it. The crisis was not only historical, it was human. It revealed how fragile our certainty truly is, and how easily we defend the illusion of knowledge rather than face the possibility of rediscovery. The maps had not only redrawn continents, they had exposed the limits of our imagination. And that realization, more than any storm or war, was the true quake that shook the foundation of modern history. Time, as always, softened resistance. The same skepticism that once mocked the idea of lost knowledge began to crumble under the weight of evidence. Slowly, piece by piece, the world started to see the ancient maps not as fantasies, but as fragments of an older truth. Modern science brought new tools, satellites, ground-penetrating radar, and global databases, and they revealed what the old maps had quietly known all along. The coastlines of Antarctica beneath the ice, the hidden ridges and mountain ranges. The exact placement of lands thought uncharted in their time. The impossible began to look less like myth and more like memory. Historians began to wonder, perhaps the maps were not drawn from imagination, but from inheritance. Perhaps the cartographers of the Renaissance had stumbled upon remnants, echoes, of civilizations erased by floods, climate shifts, or the slow erosion of time. This idea reshaped the question itself. It was no longer a how did they know, but rather a what did they remember. In this light, the Piri Reis Map became more than a riddle, it became a bridge. A connection between two worlds, the known and the forgotten, the modern and the ancient. Scientists who once dismissed such artifacts began to accept a deeper possibility, that humanity's story might not be a ladder rising from darkness to light, but a series of waves, each civilization reaching great heights before the tide of time swept it away. And yet through it all, something endured. The will to record, the instinct to map, the human need to leave a mark upon the vastness of the earth. In that understanding lies the quiet revelation that every map is both a memory and a prophecy. What the ancients left behind was not a message of dominance, but of continuity, a silent assurance that knowledge, though lost, always finds its way home. Beyond the ink and the parchment, beyond the scholars and the skeptics, the story of the ancient maps transforms into something larger, a mirror held up to humanity itself. Because these maps are not only about geography, they are about memory. They remind us that knowledge is never truly linear. It flows, recedes, and returns like the tides that shape the shores they so carefully depict. Perhaps the greatest revelation is not that someone once mapped the earth before us, but that we have always been rediscovering ourselves. Every age believes it is the first to understand, yet beneath every discovery lies the echo of an older truth. These forgotten cartographers, whoever they were, saw what we see now, a fragile planet suspended in darkness, divided not by borders but by curiosity and wonder. They looked upon the same oceans, the same mountains, the same stars, and sought to understand their place within them. Their maps whisper a message that transcends time, one that says progress is not measured by how much we conquer, but by how much we remember. In the curves of coastlines drawn with trembling hands, there lies something sacred, the timeless human urge to explore, to question, to know. And perhaps that is the real secret of these ancient maps, that they were never meant to rewrite history, but to remind us that history is a circle, and we are still walking along its edge. And so, as the last folds of parchment are rolled shut, we are left with silence, not the silence of ignorance, but of awe. The quiet that comes after truth reveals itself too completely to deny. The ancient maps have spoken. They have crossed centuries of dust and disbelief to remind us that the world has always been larger than our imagination allows. What we call a discovery may only be rediscovery. What we label a progress may be the faint memory of something once known and lost. Perhaps humanity has walked this road before, rising, reaching, vanishing, and rising again. Perhaps each civilization, like a wave, carries fragments of the one before it, a chart, a myth, a whisper on old skin. And when those fragments resurface, they do not rewrite history, they awaken it. So the next time we gaze upon the edges of a map, we should remember that every border, every coastline, every uncharted space is not an end, but an invitation. An invitation to look deeper, to question louder, to remember longer. Because the greatest discoveries are not the lands we find, but the truths we dare to see, hidden in the maps of our own forgotten past.